He's a top-class striker. He's a real team player. He's got a year to go in his contract at Lille, so he's cheap. Every time he's been asked to step up to a new level in his career, he's done it. There's a few others in the Premier League that are really keen on him as well. So Newcastle will have competition. If you're looking at the options that are probably going to be available to him, is there going to be a better one than Newcastle?
Hello and welcome to the NUFC Thursday Show. A bit of a different one for you today. I've got a special guest, my inaugural guest, and it's a very, very special one for anyone who's watched the channel for a long time. Steve Caldwell, former Newcastle United defender, but he's not here to talk about his time at Newcastle United. He's here to talk about a very, very special transfer link that's been come across in the last few days. Newcastle, after a striker this summer, on their list is Jonathan David from Canada and Lille. You worked with him in the Canada national team. So I thought I'd get you on just to give a little bit of a chat about him. First of all, welcome to the show. First guest, as I said. Could you just let the listeners know, or the viewers know, how you know Jonathan David, how you've worked with him, and what you think he's capable of.
Okay, thanks, Harry, for having me on. As always, it's a pleasure to be here. I've known Jonathan David for a few years now, maybe for about 3 or 4 years. I've worked with him a couple of times as a coach, assistant coach for the Canadian men's national team. So I've got to know him pretty well as a football player and his abilities and strengths as a football player. And he is someone who has really developed in the Canadian programme over the last 3 or 4 years. He came as a bit of an unknown before my time. John Herdman gave him his chance, and nobody knew who he was. He was from Ottawa. He had went to Belgium to play, and suddenly he was getting his first cap. And basically, he's went from strength to strength from there. He went from Belgium to France to Lille, and scored a lot of goals at Lille. Obviously, won a championship with Lille, which is quite incredible. Beat PSG to a championship a few years ago. And he's someone who he's not a fussy guy. He's a quiet guy. He gets along with his business. He doesn't bother too much about the other trappings or things that come with being a professional football player. He just loves to play football, and he's a top class striker. He's just coming off a Copa America where he's had a difficult tournament. I have to say he's been a bit off, and probably in the last year or two, his form with Canada has been a bit patchy, which is concerning for Canada. But when he's been with Lille, he's been excellent.
Is there a reason why his form's patchy?
He's looked a bit hesitant, which is a bit concerning because he is a very good finisher. But in the red of Canada, he's been a bit hesitant in front of goal. He's doing a lot of work off the ball as well. He's a real team player, Jonathan David. He's one of the best defensive forwards I've ever worked with. He's the lines that he takes to cut off easy passes into midfield and things like that are outstanding. He's a good presser. He understands cues when to press, and he's exceptional at that, like as good as anybody in the world, I would say. And then the other side of his game is that he's a stocky looking guy, but he's quicker than he looks. He can shift when he wants, and for Lille, he's quite prolific. Like he normally, when he's in front of goal, he makes it count. But for Canada, he's been hesitant, and it could be maybe the different style of football. I think it's one thing. The fact that he's doing tons of work for Canada, sort of like this midfield forward hybrid role, and the fact that maybe it's playing on his mind a bit that he scored in the Copa America. I gotta say, he scored a great goal on the counter attack against Peru that Canada won 1-0. So he never had a terrible tournament, but there was other opportunities that he could have put in the back of the net that he didn't, which might affect his stock a little bit as he looks to get this move this summer.
Just for the viewers out there, Steve was a coach at Canada, weren't you? But you also now work as TSN as a pundit and an analyst, so you know your stuff when it comes to Canada, very much so. The interesting thing about David, I think we'll get into his game a little bit. I think what you said about pressing and how that fits into Newcastle and a lot of Premier League teams, but Newcastle specifically. I think this was a link that really excited me. As soon as I heard it, I was straight onto WhatsApp to get you on the show, because I think he would be like a bit like, it reminds me very much of when Newcastle signed Alexander Isak a couple of years ago, because I was really excited about that. And he's a player that apparently he's available for 30 million euros this summer, apparently, which is, I don't know if you know anything about that. There's a bargain there for anyone, isn't there, really?
Yeah, and that's the key. So he's got a year to go in his contract at Lille, so he's cheap for his quality. I think maybe even less. He might get him for 20 million. Probably that'll be a bit of the negotiation in terms of what he's worth. We're just having a year until he would be free completely. So it's you're taking a bit of a chance, but he's got pedigree. He's shown that in Ligue 1 he can score goals. And he's been so important for Lille. But for that kind of money, the upside's huge. Every time he's been asked to step up to a new level in his career, he's done it. He's only 24 years old. He's still young. I feel like he's been around forever, but he's still young. So there's a lot of development to come. So I think for 20 million, everyone seems to think 20 million, whatever it would be, to say 20 to 30 million, it's certainly worth the risk, because if he goes and he scores 15 goals in the Premier League and he gets off and running, and immediately he's at the age he's at, he's probably double that price. If Newcastle wanted to sell him as an asset, or at least keep him there and have him as one of the main strikers moving forward. So he's got a lot of upside. He'll be on a few radars, I think. Milan clubs like him as well. There's been a lot of talk through the years, Serie A, with Jonathan. But Premier League, I know there's a few others in the Premier League that are really keen on him as well. So Newcastle will have competition.
He skipped MLS or Major League Soccer or North American academies. And I did an article on him for BBC Sport a few years ago, for which I spoke to you about. And I spoke to the coach that he had in Ottawa. And they were really surprised that he sort of turned down, I think, Vancouver Whitecaps and maybe a couple of like the New York sides, and just decided, no, I'm going to go to Genk. Ghent, was it, or Genk? I think one of the two.
Belgium. Ghent. I think. Yeah.
Ghent, yeah. And he went straight there, and he was like, I'm gonna go to Europe, and it was almost like Europe was where he wanted to be, and how is that why John Herdman and nobody had heard of him, because he wasn't in the North American sphere, and he'd gone to Europe, and it wasn't, the scouting network wasn't as great there. What was and how was that received in Canada, that he has become this sort of like really, really top player, and one of the two main guys, obviously, with Alphonso Davies, and who's also done it, but he went Vancouver Whitecaps, then Bayern Munich. He's just skipped the North American. How's that been received in Canada?
Yeah, well, this is for another show, but the whole system in Canada is a little messed up in terms of the development and the pathways. So a lot of kids think, let's just go straight to Europe. They try and find pathways straight to Europe. Jonathan was one of the guys. I don't think he ever really entertained MLS. He always wanted to go to Europe, and he went at a young age to Belgium. But it was a big loss. I mean, he's in Ottawa, he's in Ontario. TFC should have known where he was, who he was, but for some reason he was looked past. And I hear a lot of stories about people that saw him play when he was 13 and 14, and he was exceptional. They liked him. My friend was coach at Vancouver Whitecaps, Carl Robinson, who I played with at Sunderland, Robbo, and he's still over here in North America. He liked him. He wanted to take him to the Whitecaps, but by that point it was too late. He was sort of on the path to Europe, and he wanted to get there and go that way, So it was a smart move. I think it developed his tactical side of his game a lot more than he might have in North America.
Yeah,
and it's made him the player that he is, because that's his biggest strength, his ability to read a game and to understand off and on the ball what's kind of needed for the team. He's a very unselfish player. He'll do a lot of work for the team, and I think that's probably one of his big strengths, that he is this team player who, he wants to score goals. Every striker does, but it's not the be all and end all for him.
It sounds like he's really ideal for the way Eddie Howe likes to play, because he obviously likes pressing, but he also likes off the ball hard work and the whole personality thing as well. Let's just touch on his personality slightly a second as well. You said you know him quite well. He's not one of those loud players, someone who's going to come in and disrupt him. Has that been to his detriment in a sense, though? Sometimes not a bit more brash and a bit more to maybe push his career on further, earlier than at Lille. He might be at a top club by now, or
yeah, I think it is. I think he's got to grow into himself still. I mean, he's still only 24, like we said. He's young, but I would challenge him if I was still coaching with Canada. I would challenge him to be more vocal. He's a quiet guy, Johnny. He's not a loud guy. He speaks French as much as he speaks English. So he sort of keeps himself to himself. So I've known him for like 3 or 4 years, but I don't know him particularly well because he's quite a reserved guy. Yeah. But he's got a sharp eye. Like he's a good listener. He wants to learn. He's got great high performance habits, and he's a real leader within the Canadian setup. But he needs to take on more responsibility in terms of leading some of Canada's younger players to their next levels. So I think that's a part of his game that if he comes to the Premier League, my experience with the Premier League and who is successful in the Premier League normally are people who are confident and aggressive and will go and grab things. He's going to have to find a bit of that if he's going to come to the Premier League and score 10 plus goals a season. He's going to have to jump a level or two. It's one thing in France where I think he feels very comfortable, but to come to the Premier League, to come to a club like Newcastle and to potentially be their number one striker, you've got to have something about you. So I'm not saying he doesn't have that. I'm saying that he's got to tap into the part of his personality that has that. I think it's there, and he's got to find it quick. Otherwise, he might get lost a bit in Newcastle.
There's the obvious elephant in the room, which is Isak as well, because obviously he's not going to. There's one position up front in a 4-3-3. He can play, as you say, he's played a bit deeper for Canada. But I think I kind of feel like from the outside looking in with players, and this happens in Europe as well, with not in inverted commas lesser nations, not the nations who win the major trophies. When they've got a couple of players like that, they kind of have to do more jobs. So like Alphonso Davies will have to create a bit more. He can't just play left back as he might do more at Bayern. And it happens in Europe as well. Gareth Bale's the best example with Wales, but he wants to play up front. But could he fit in around Isak? Could they play together as a pair? Do you think that would work? I
think they could. I think that Jonathan David is better as a sort of 10 type player. He's not a traditional Bergkamp type 10. He's more a second striker.
Yeah.
But like I said, he'll do the work. The left winger will be out of position. He'll track back like 40 yards into the left wing position to help a guy that's maybe out of position. He's that kind of player. But as a lone 9, I don't think that's his best position. I think he's better off another striker. He likes to roam a bit as well. He likes to come into midfield areas and get on the ball, get touches. Trying to compare him to Isak is hard. I'm a huge admirer of Isak. I think he's a ridiculous player. Yeah. Can Newcastle keep Isak? That's a big question as well.
Long term, it'll be a tough question. I think he's probably going to sign. I think he's probably going to sign a new contract, but they'll probably like Bruno Guimaraes. They'll probably stick I imagine they'll stick a release clause in his contract because then it protects his value. And I think the longer they go without Champions League, and this is probably there'll be offers in the Champions League for Jonathan as well. I'm sure he'll have plenty of offers like that as well. But if Jonathan sort of feels a little bit like where Isak was, in that he's ready for the next move, and if you sell in the project, it might work. That's what it kind of feels like to me, and that he's not really appreciated by the top clubs. Otherwise, he'd be at one. And I remember you saying to me, in that for that article when we spoke for that article on BBC Sport. This was pre when they played Chelsea in the Champions League a couple of years ago. That you thought he could play for Liverpool or Man City, and he's still not getting the. He's still not. I think it almost feels like he needs to prove that at another another level between Lille and there first. And Newcastle might be. That's where Newcastle might be the right option, because he could grow with Newcastle and become the player he wants to be with a club that's going, trying to get into the Champions League itself.
Yeah, I think he needs that step of somewhere in England, and I mean, Newcastle are a huge club now, and they're obviously competing to certainly get in Champions League, and very soon I'm sure they'll be competing to win league titles. But he needs that sort of like stepping stone, whether it's a Newcastle or it's a Brentford or a Brighton. West Ham's been mentioned with him a lot of times as well. He probably needs to come to the Premier League and prove his worth in my opinion, the best league in the world. So it might be good if Isak is going to stay for a year or two. It might be good for Johnny to come and maybe not play so much in the first year, get acclimatised, get used to it, play with Isak, maybe play some things as a replacement to Isak, and just try and bed himself in to a club like Newcastle in the Premier League, because if he realises his full potential, I think he's well capable of being an outstanding striker in the Premier League. What does that mean? Is it like, would he get 30 plus goals? I'm not sure, because I think his strengths are more, yes, he is a goal scorer, he'll score goals, but his strengths more his general play and his willingness to sort of do the best thing for the team. He's so smart. He's a very smart player, and I think like as you start to work out who he is and where he could fit, Eddie Howe will realise he's got a real player in his hands and someone who can be of great value.
He's got double figures in every season he's played in France. So the idea that he would, and what you said, I think really is a great thing about him coming and learning from Isak, maybe, or not learning from Isak, but playing a bit part, acclimatized. Yeah, is a really good thing. Is a really good point. And I think actually the question is, would he be up for that? Do you think?
He's always made smart moves though. He went to places where he's played. So I think he might be a little reluctant if he thinks he's not going to play a lot. He might be reluctant to choose Newcastle as an example.
Yeah.
Because he's took the next step and he's developed and he's got game time and he's shown that he's well capable of that level. So if he is going to go to the Premier League, I think the project of the club that he would go to would be important to him. Knowing that he's got to play, he's got to score goals and show that he's up to the next level. So it would be an interesting one. I mean, there's no guaranteed starters in the Premier League, especially if you're coming from Lille. You would need to understand that. But to me, it's a much better move than like Serie A. Like, I don't know if he goes to AC Milan. Like, I just don't know. Yeah, he'd probably have Champions League or whatever, and he would get development for sure. But he's still going to go to that stepping stone in the Premier League before he goes to a top team. So, if he can go there in this move, my opinion is that it's better for his career to take this move. And if you're looking at the options that are probably going to be available to him, is there going to be a better one than Newcastle? Like, I mean, not to say he's going to wear the number 9 for Newcastle, but a centre forward for Newcastle is like idolised. If he comes and the fans take to him, he gets a few goals in the first few games, there's literally no better place to play football than St James's Park if you're the central striker and you're scoring goals. And so what a move it would be for him. I'm obviously biased. I spent a long time there and I love the club, but it would be incredible and it would be a big step in his career because he would start to show, I think, everyone, the world, that he's capable of settling in at that standard.
Final question: have you had any inkling as to what his head's at? Is he? I mean, is he definitely going to move this summer? And if he is going to move, has he got a preference? Have you got any insight you could give us as an exclusive on this on this burgeoning YouTube channel that's desperate for some for some clicks.
I do not know for sure where he's going to land. I'm pretty certain he's going to move this summer. Like Lille are going to cash in on him, and he wants to move, and he's been a great servant to that club. So he's definitely going to go somewhere. Like I said, I think, I mean, if I was the owners in Newcastle or the chief executive, I would be trying to pay as little as possible, saying he's only got a year to go. So I think it might drag on for a little bit, because I think the clubs will put in some kind of cheeky offers, just trying to get him cheaper, because he's up next summer. And I've got a feeling he'll go to the Premier League. He'll go to somebody in the Premier League. So it'll just be a question of who can put the best project in front of him, who can convince him that this is the best. Like he's a really strategic guy. He's making these steps, the next best step for his career. He kind of knows where he wants to be, and he's done a great job of that so far, leaving Ottawa, going to Belgium, landing in France. Like the success he then had there, he's made some great decisions in his career. So I think he'll be very strategic about this next one, and the smart move financially and for his football development is Premier League.
Thanks very much, Steve. Really appreciate it. Please continue to like, share, and subscribe. I'm trying to get to 500 subscribers before the start of the season. But I really hope you've enjoyed this video, and it's really good to get your insight as well, Steve. Thank you so much. Thank you very much. I'll see you next time.